the topic which has been allotted to me is anesthetic management of cleft children. So basically, these cleft children will be presented to you, will be given to you in your examination as a short case or maybe as a long case. And the examiner will straight away come to you, and after examining the child, he will ask you certain questions. The set of questions I have already, listed over here, and he'll ask you certain questions, these questions one by one, and you need to give straight answers to these questions. If you answer these questions in an appropriate fashion, you will score 100% marks in your examination. So I'll try to, tell you how to answer these questions. So this is a 10-month-old, 9 kg female child presented to us with cleft lip and cleft palate. She has history of frequent cough and cold, and at present running nose is also present, but the secretions are clear. She is posted for cleft lip and cleft palate repair in a single sitting. Now the examiner will straight away ask you, what is the incidence of cleft lip and cleft palate? So the incidence of cleft lip isolated with or without cleft palate is 1:1000, in which boys predominate more than the girls, whereas the incidence of cleft palate is 1:2500, in which the girls predominate more than the boys. Now, why is it so that the girls predominate more than the boys for the incidence of cleft palate? Is just because the girls, the development of face normally takes place at around 5 to 12 weeks. In girls, the development of face is 1 week delayed. Hence, the development of palate is 1 week delayed, and the incidence of cleft palate is higher in females as compared to males. Now, what is the cause of this abnormality? So a cleft lip is caused by the failure of fusion of the maxillary process with the medial and the lateral nasal processes. It can be unilateral or it can be bilateral. Whereas a cleft palate, it can be a prepalatal cleft or it can be a postpalatal cleft. A prepalatal cleft means that there is cleft in the anterior palate, the alveolus, the lip, nostril, or the floor of the ala nasi. And this is caused by the failure of the mesodermal elements to develop and fuse. Whereas a postpalatal cleft, that is a cleft in the soft palate or a hard palate, is caused by the failure of the palatal ridges to migrate medially and fuse. So let me repeat it once again. A cleft lip is caused by failure of the maxillary process with the medial and the lateral nasal process, whereas a cleft palate, a prepalatal cleft, is caused by the failure of the mesodermal elements to develop and fuse, whereas a postpalatal cleft, that is cleft in the soft palate and the hard palate, is caused by the failure of the palatal ridges to migrate and fuse. Now, the third question is, what are the associated anomalies? So these children, as they have congenital anomalies, various other anomalies of limbs, heart, various other organs like kidney, liver, they are very frequently associated in these children. But there are various other syndromes which are associated. Of them, the most common syndrome is the Perry-Robin sequence. This Perry-Robin sequence, 80% of the children have cleft palate. They also have micrognathia and glossoptosis. So the problem with these children is this, that they are very difficult to intubate because of the micrognathia and glossoptosis. But the advantage is this, that as the age advances, as the child grows older, the intubation becomes easier. So if it is not an urgency, we tend to postpone these children for a higher age groups so that it can be easier to intubate, and then the surgery can be proceeded. Apart from Perry-Robin sequence, the other syndromes which are associated are Treacher-Collins syndrome. Treacher-Collins syndrome, 28% children of Treacher-Collins have cleft palate. They also have maxillary and mandibular hypoplasia. Along with it, choanal atresia, eye and ear malformations. The problem with these children is this, that because of the underdevelopment of the maxilla and the mandible, the intubation becomes difficult as the age advances. Similar is the case with hemifacial microsomia, in which there is unilateral maxillary and mandibular hypoplasia, along with cervical spine anomalies, eye and ear anomalies. The same problem is this, that the intubation becomes difficult as the age advances. So Perry-Robin, Treacher-Collins, hemifacial microsomia. Other syndromes which are associated are velocardiofacial syndrome, in which you have microcephaly, microstomia, flat nasal bridge, small ears, short stature, immune deficiencies, tracheal anomalies, and veropharyngeal incompetence. Also, soft palate is associated in these children. Other syndromes associated are Strickler syndrome, Down syndrome, and Klippel-Feil syndrome. In Klippel-Feil syndrome, there is 15% chances of cleft palate. These children have short web neck and cervical spine, cervical vertebra are fused. So it is very difficult to make a position for intubation in these patients. Also, these patients have congenital cardiac defects also. Now, the fourth question is, what are the problems associated with these children? These children are very much problematic. They have a lot of problems associated with them. The first and foremost problem associated with them is they have feeding difficulties. So they are unable to create a negative suction, and hence these children are always malnourished. These children have swallowing difficulties because of the incoordination to breathe, suck, and swallow at the same time. On top of that, they have nasal regurgitation and frequent choking spells. Because of these frequent choking spells, they have micro aspirations and they have repeated chest infections. So feeding is a problem, swallowing is a problem, recurrent chest infection is a problem, hearing is a problem for them. They have eustachian tube dysfunction with middle ear effusions and conductive hearing loss. Along with that, they have speech difficulties. They have hypernasality in their voice. They cannot pronounce the plosives like P, K, D, P and fricatives like S and F. So speech is a problem for them. Because of the development of the face is improper, they have defective tooth development also. Along with that, because of all these anomalies, and on top of that, the physical appearance of the child, the physical appearance of the face is defective. Hence, psychological issues is a major problem for these children. So you have to treat these children in a very sophisticated manner, because these children, along with their parents, both tend to have some psychological deficiencies in them. Now, the fifth question is, what is the timing of the surgery? So the timing of the surgery is done in such a way, we can do these surgeries right at the birth also. A cleft lip can be repaired right at the birth also. But because these children have a lot of, you see, congenital problems, they may be unmasked if you buy some time. Along with that, what happens is this, because this is a pure elective surgery and we do not want any morbidity or mortality in these children, so we give them some time so that organs can be matured enough so that whatever amount of drugs which we are giving can be easily excreted out and they may not cause any problems to these children. So for cleft lip, they are done early so as to prevent feeding difficulties. So we have, in fact, a Kilner's rule of 10 has been very well followed. It says that 10 gram hemoglobin, the child should be 10 pounds in weight, so that around 3 to 4 kgs of child should be there. 10 weeks of age, that is around 2.5 months to 3 months of age. And the counts, the total leukocyte count should be less than 10,000. That means the child should be infection-free. The cleft palate is done at a later stage so as to prevent difficulty in the speech, hearing, and facial growth. So it is done somewhere around 10 months of age. Again, the Kilner's rule of 10 stands true for this also, so that the hemoglobin of 10, a weight of 10 kgs, a age of 10 months, and a total leukocyte count of less than 10,000. So this is the timing of the surgery. If the child has come to you in a later stage, that is this child, like it is a 10-month-old child, this child could not undergo a cleft lip surgery previously. So we are doing this cleft lip and cleft palate surgery in a single sitting. This is also very well advocated. The only precaution with these children should be, because this will last longer, so the hemoglobin of the child should be good enough. Now, how do you assess a child? What about the preoperative assessment? This is the most essential step in doing any pediatric anesthesia case. If you have done a good preoperative assessment, 50% of your workload has already been covered. Now, why do we need to do a preoperative assessment? The preoperative assessment is done so as to see whether the child is fit or unfit for surgery. What are the various diseases which the child is harboring at this present moment or not? How can we optimize these diseases so that we can give a good outcome for the surgery? What will be the anesthetic regimen for this child? And above all, to establish a good rapport with the parents so that they may hand over their child, their piece of art to you for the surgery. So a good preoperative assessment and talking to the parents is very essential. Now, the assessment of the child is examination of an opportunity. If the child is crying, look for the airway, look for the color, look for the extremities. If the child is calm, then look for the heart, lungs, and the abdomen. The child is examined from head to toe. You must ask all the relevant histories pertaining to this child. First, ask the history of gestational age, whether the child was born mature or premature, whether the child needed NICU care or not, whether the child cried just immediately after birth or not, whether the child if was kept in NICU, whether the child was intubated, or whether the child was only on CPAP or on oxygen therapy. Why do we need to ask all these things? Because the child can be, you see, premature, and the apnea of prematurity persists up to 60 weeks of gestational age. That means even after 4 to 5 months of birth, the child can have apnea of prematurity. You have done the surgery and you have shifted the child to the post-op room, and later on the child goes apneic. So we need to know what was the maturity of the child. These child have frequent respiratory infections, so we need to know all about how many times the child has undergone chest infections, how many times in a year or how many times in a month does the child have running nose, what are the type of secretions, what are the color of secretions. We need to know all these things. So this child, as I have told you, this is a child which is having clear secretions. They have running nose. So can we post this child for surgery? Yes, we should post this child for surgery because the secretions are clear. The child doesn't look too moribund. The child doesn't look ill enough. The child is not running fever at present. So because if we do not do these surgeries for these clear secretions, that means we will not get enough period, the window period for doing the surgery, because these children will always harbor some amount of infection. They will be having secretions which may be present. A small amount of fever may be present. So if we do not do these surgeries in these window period, we will never get the chance to do these surgeries throughout the year. We need to examine this child, right, about the airway problems, because they have associated cleft lip and cleft palate. There are various craniofacial anomalies which may be present. There may be regurgitation of milk after feeding. Tachypnea may be present. Breath holding spells may be present. There is history of frequent URTI and history of allergies we need to sort for. We must need to ask about the history of convulsions, because these children are prone for post-operative and intraoperative seizures. These children can have history of meningitis, encephalitis, or febrile convulsions, or even neurocystic cirrhosis. So we need to ask pertinent history about the convulsions, whether the child is on anticonvulsants or not. If the child is on anticonvulsants, we need to administer anticonvulsants, loading those before the surgery, because after the surgery, the child will be in stress, or even during the surgery and in the post-operative period, because of hyponatremia, because of stress, the child may convulse. We must ask about history of sleeping disturbances, obstructive sleep apnea. If the child snores during sleep or not, the child tosses on the bed, that means the child is having some element of obstructive sleep apnea, and these children will be posing difficulty for intubation, and even in the post-operative period, where they will be having tongue fall and the child will having desaturation. We must ask history about cardiorespiratory problems, because these children are prone for hypoxia, arrhythmias, cardiovascular instabilities, and paradoxical air embolism also. So a history of cyanotic spells, history of any cardiac surgery done previously, poor feeding habits, or failure to thrive, or recurrent URTI. This all suggests that the patient is having some cardiac issues. Respiratory problems, I have already told you. Renal problems, definitely the patient, you must ask the parents about, is there any hematuria? What is the color of the urine? Amount of urine which the child passes per day. We do not need to measure it. The parents do not need to measure it, but they must know whether the child is passing adequate amount of urine or not. GI problems in the form of diarrhea, vomiting, melena, or regurgitation of food, you must always assess. Hematological issues in the form of thalassemia, sickle cell disease, clotting anomalies, all these we need to assess. Whether the child is on any medications in the form of corticosteroids, cardiorespiratory medications, anticonvulsants, chemotherapeutic agents, all these we need to assess. Whether the child has any limb deformities, milestones, were they adequately on time, like walking and sitting, social smile, muscular dystrophies, and facial stiffness. This must be taken into account. So a good preoperative assessment is very essential if we assess right from the head to toe about the child. The next question is about the pre-medication. So if the child is less than 6 to 8 months of age, we do not need any pre-medication because there is no parental separation anxiety. Hence, pre-medication is not required for a child less than 6 months of age. But if the child is more than 6 to 8 months of age, we can give midazolam 0.25 to 0.5 milligram per kg orally, half an hour to 45 minutes before the surgery. Now, some people say about the parental presence. Yes, the parental presence can serve as a good pre-medication, but only if the child is more than 2 years of age and the child is very anxious, but the parents are not anxious. If the parents are also anxious, this parental presence is contraindicated. Simultaneously, the parental presence is also contraindicated if you have anticipated that it is a difficult airway, or if the child is not adequately fasted, or if the child is a traumatic patient, definitely parental presence is contraindicated. Now, what preoperative investigations you like to have for this child? As I have told you, this is a pure elective surgery, and you have done a good preoperative assessment of the child, and we see that there are no other congenital malformations, congenital deficiencies which are present in this child. Not many preoperative investigations are required. At max, what we can do is we can have a hemoglobin, a TLC, and a DLC for this patient. Why a hemoglobin? Because in our scenarios, in Indian scenarios, most of these children are anemic. So we need to assess what is the hemoglobin status of the patient. These children also have some respiratory infections, some upper respiratory infections which are present. So a total leukocyte count and a differential leukocyte count is all what is required. Otherwise, the investigations in the form of kidney profile, liver profile, heart, lung, X-ray chest, 2D echocardiography can only be done, should only be done. In fact, I should say, if we find that there are some deficiencies, some congenital deficiencies, or some history pertaining to some such system is present. If for this children, like we are doing a cleft lip and a cleft palate surgery in a single sitting, we can have a blood grouping and a cross matching, because this child may require a blood transfusion if the child is a little bit anemic. Otherwise, only hemoglobin, TLC, and GLC is what maximally we can have. If the child doesn't have any bleeding deficiencies, bleeding diathesis, a PT and APTT is also not required. But if the history suggests, a PT, APTT, and a platelet count can be done. Now, what is the fasting status of the child? What should be the fasting status of the child? A prolonged fasting can lead to hypoglycemia, dehydration, irritability, excessive crying, more respiratory secretions, and decreased in the gastric pH. All this will be very deleterious, and hence we do not advocate too much fasting in these children. Previously, the guidelines have been issued that a 2-hourly fasting for clear liquids was advocated for children less than 6 months of age. And that's very true. But nowadays, the latest guidelines say that even a 1-hour fasting of clear fluids is good enough. This will help reduce the hypoglycemia, dehydration, and irritability. And what we do is, in our setups, what we do is we allow the mother to feed the child with clear fluids in the form of sugar and water, or maybe an apple juice, which is a clear fluid. The child is also happy. The mother is also happy that she has fed the child, and the child is not anxious. The child comes to OT in a calm state. So the guidelines say that less than 6 months of age, clear fluids up to 2 hours, breast milk up to 4 hours, and solids up to 6 hours. For 6 months to 36 months of age, clear fluid up to 3 hours, breast milk up to 6 hours, and solids up to 6 hours. And more than 36 months, clear fluid up to 3 hours, breast milk up to 6 hours, and solids up to 8 hours. This is what has been advocated in the guidelines. What intraoperative monitoring is required for these children? Definitely minimal mandatory monitoring in the form of heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, temperature, SpO2, ECG, EtCO2 is required. But for these children, inhaled and inhaled respiratory volumes, airway pressures, and anesthetic gases also must. Why airway pressures are required? Because we are putting in an endotracheal tube which passes through the oral cavity, and the surgeon also applies a retractor by which the endotracheal tube can be compressed. Hence, the airway pressures will go up, and we need to assess these airway pressures for our monitoring purposes. If we do not have sophisticated workstations, a very sophisticated hand which can assess the rise in the airway pressures is a must for these children. Also, not to emphasize too much upon the precaudal stethoscope, everybody should apply a precaudal stethoscope for these children, by which you can assess the heart sounds, also the respiratory sounds on the left side for these children. Temperature assessment is very essential because these children can go into hypothermia. So temperature assessment is a must for these children. I definitely advocate use of two temperatures, a peripheral temperature as well as a core temperature also. Why both these temperatures are required? Those temperatures are required because if both the core and the peripheral are down, that means the child is in hypothermia. If both are up, that means the child is in hypothermia. Whereas if the core temperature is normal, whereas the peripheral temperature is down, that means the child is having hypovolemia, and one needs to replace fluids so that the core and the peripheral temperature both can be balanced enough. That's why the use of warming blankets for these children is very essential. Also, for monitoring purposes, blood loss estimation is definitely required because even a small amount of blood loss can be deleterious for these children. Now, about the surgical techniques, the 11th question is about the surgical techniques. What surgical technique is advocated for these children? I'm just telling this question to you so that the examiner may ask you what surgical techniques is required. So for a unilateral cleft lip, we can note it down. For a unilateral cleft lip, a Millard's technique can be used or a Tenisan's technique. These are the two techniques which are utilized for a cleft lip repair, unilateral. Whereas for a bilateral cleft lip, it is a view 3 straight line repair. So for a cleft lip, unilateral, Millard's technique or a Tenisan's technique is utilized. Whereas for a bilateral, a view 3 straight line repair is utilized. For a cleft palate, a 2-flap palatoplasty or a Furlow's technique. These are the two techniques which are utilized for a repair of the cleft palate. So for a cleft lip, a Millard's technique or a Tenisan's technique. For bilateral cleft lip, it's a view 3 straight line repair. Whereas for a cleft palate, it is a 2-flap palatoplasty or a Furlow's technique which can be utilized. Now, about the induction, how to induce this child? So the child can be induced either through inhalational, intravenous, or intramuscular approaches. Intramuscular approaches definitely we do not utilize much, but they are reserved only for those who have developmental delays or who have severe cardiac anomalies. But as I have told you that this is a pure elective surgery, we do not take up those children who have severe developmental delays or with cardiac issues, because we need to have a no morbidity or no mortality in these elective cases. So inhalational induction with the help of sevoflurane or halothane is utilized if the child is younger. The induction with halothane will be more deeper as compared to sevoflurane, just because the maximum dial concentration of the halothane is 5, and the blood gas coefficient for halothane or the MAC value for halothane is 0.75. So 6 MAC multiples of halothane will go as compared to 4 MAC multiples of sevoflurane only. Hence, the child will be more deeper than halothane. We can induce either with halothane or with isoflurane. Both are good enough for inhalation induction. And we can also do an IV induction for patients who are full stomach, trauma, older children, and those with propensity for malignant hypothermia. The advantages with IV induction is this, that it causes rapid onset, elimination of the face mask, and feeling of suffocation. And there's also decreased chances of laryngospasm and decrease in the excitement phase. Hence, IV induction for older children is preferred. What about the intubation? Which endotracheal tube will you use? So 3 types of endotracheal tubes which can be used is RAE, flexometallic, and Macintosh. What we prefer is south-facing, preformed oral ring Adair Elvin tube. Advantage with these tubes is this, that it can be placed away from the surgical field. But the disadvantage is this, that because they are preformed and they have a fixed curvature, there will be difficulty to pass a suction catheter through them. and there are more chances, because of the fixed curvature, there are more chances of endobronchial intubation and inadvertent extubation while positioning the child. Alternatively, flexometallic tubes can also be utilized, but the problem with flexometallic tube is this, that because of the presence of the ring, the inner diameter decreases and hence the airway pressure increases. And if the surgeon accidentally retracts with the retractor, and if the tube is kinked, it will be a permanent kinking in a flexometallic tube, and one needs to extubate this child and pass another tube before starting the case. Macintosh tube or plain PVC tubes can also be utilized, but they are very easily compressible. Now the question comes, can LMA be utilized for such patients? Yes, LMA can be utilized only for cleft lip repair, but not for cleft palate repair. The reason being, in a cleft palate repair, the surgeon applies a retractor and there will be very less oral opening after the placement of the LMA, and hence the surgeon cannot operate. So a LMA can be utilized only for a cleft lip repair, but not for a cleft palate repair. Now, what are the additional precautions? The 14th question is, what additional precautions you need to take? So after intubation, in a cleft lip repair, a pharyngeal pack must be placed only for cleft lip repair, and the end of this pharyngeal pack must protrude out of the oral cavity, because this pack is very easily forgettable, and in the post-operative period, this may lead to airway compromise and apnea in these children. Hence, one end of the pack must always protrude out, so that it is always remembered to take out the pack after the surgery is done. Orogastric tube is passed to empty the stomach and any aerophagia which has occurred. Proper eye padding must be done for these children because of the chances of trauma to the eye. The dose of the local anesthetic must be taken. We must not instill too much amount of local anesthetic. It should be done according to the age and the weight of the child. Now, what is the position of the child? The whole of the child is raised on a thick foam, and a head is slipped back into a head ring, hyperextended. This allows adequate exposure and pooling of the blood into the nasopharynx, from where it can be easily suctioned out. So the whole child is raised. Many a times, what we have seen that the anesthetist, they actually put a small pillow or a roll beneath the shoulders of the child, and this leads to post-operative pain in these children. Hence, if we allow the whole of the child to be raised on a 8 to 10 centimeters pillow or on a thick foam, and the head is hyperextended, that will make a good position for easy accessibility of these children. Now, 16th question is, what fluid and how much should be given to these children? Now, as I have told you that about the fasting guidelines, so if we are allowing clear fluids even up to 2 hours or 1 hour before the surgery, we do not require too much amount of fluid intraoperatively. This will avoid any fluid imbalances. This will avoid any electrolyte imbalances in these children. Hence, what we do is we advocate the use of ringer lactate in these children. Hypotonic fluids in the form of 5% dextrose or isolite P, which contains 1/5 normal saline. That means the sodium is only 31 milliequivalent in isolite P. These type of fluids will lead to hyponatremia in the postoperative period, and the child will convulse. So it is always advocated to use ringer lactate or a balanced salt solution in these children. And as I've told you about the minimal fasting, hence less intraoperative replacement. Maximal, what we can do is we use a burette chamber in these children, and we fill an amount of around 10 ml per kg for these children. So if the child is less than 10 kgs of weight, we fill around less than 100 ml per kg, 100 ml total in that burette chamber. Even if that fluid is accidentally opened fully, only 10 ml per kg of the fluid, and this will not create any harm. But if the blood loss is too much, if the blood loss is more than a maximal allowable blood loss, MABL, we calculate what is the maximal amount of blood loss. So a maximal MABL or maximum amount of blood loss which can be calculated is hematocrit starting minus hematocrit minimum, which the child can tolerate, upon hematocrit starting multiplied by blood volume will give you what is the maximum amount of blood loss which can be tolerated by the child. If this amount is exceeded, we need to replace it with blood. Otherwise, most of the children, the surgery is 45 to 1 hour maximum duration. For these amount of duration, 10 ml per kg of ringer lactate is good enough for these children. What are the analgesics which we administer for these children? So we try to administer a multimodal analgesia, in which for a cleft lip children, we advocate the use of bilateral infraorbital nerve block. For a cleft palate, we administer a palatine nerve block. Or alternatively, we can give a maxillary nerve block using a suprazygomatic approach. Along with that, fentanyl 1 to 2 microgram per kg every 20 to 30 minutes is given, plus injection paracetamol 10 to 15 ml per kg intravenously, or 30 to 40 milligram per kg per rectal suppository is administered. Along with this, dexamethasone 0.1 milligram per kg, which serves as an antiemetic and an analgesic, is given. So a block plus fentanyl plus paracetamol plus dexamethasone will give a good multimodal analgesia in these children. What precautions? So before extubation in these children, direct visualization of the oropharynx must be done, because there may be blood, there may be clots, there may be any pharyngeal pack which has to be removed. A good suctioning of the blood and clots is to be done oropharynx and the nasopharynx. But we must take care that we must not disrupt the sutures, the surgical sutures which have been done by the surgeon. Removal of the pack is a must. Assessing the good hemostasis has been done. The child must not ooze in between. The child is extubated in a head up or a lateral position, and child is nursed in a lateral position with head low and hyperextended, so that whatever amount of fluid or blood is coming in the oral cavity comes out through the cheek and the child does not aspirate them. A good suctioning, blood pressure, pulse rate, temperature, and SpO2 monitoring should be done in the postoperative period also. Elbow restraints and boxer's gloves should be advocated, because the child will accidentally take his arms or take his hand towards the sutures, towards the surgical field, and will disrupt the sutures. If micrognathia and glossoptosis is present, as in Perry-Robin sequence, a nasopharyngeal airway can be placed before extubation in the child, or even a tongue stage can be placed, and it is fixed posteriorly to the chin or to the cheek, so that the tongue is protruded out and it doesn't fall and causes airway obstruction. The child is nursed in a high humid atmosphere, avoiding any hypothermia, and the feeding is restarted as early as possible with sugar and water, and burping is done so that the child doesn't aspirate just after the feeding. What are the most common complications which these child encounter? So the most common complications which these child encounter is vomiting, which is present in around 30% of the patients, inadequate recovery in around 22%, bleeding in around 20%, inadequate pain control in around 14%, pyrexia or fever in around 9%, and airway related issues in around another 5% of the patients. Now, the examiner may ask you about the pain assessment tools. So how do you assess pain in these children? So if I ask you about the pain assessment, most of the people will answer, sir, we'll ask about the VAS. So, but a 5 months old or a 6 months old child, can he tell you about the VAS scoring what he is having? No. So if the child is younger, that means around 2 months to 10 years of age, a FLAC scoring, that is face, leg, activity, cry, and consolability score, is utilized for assessing the pain. So each category, that is face, leg, activity, cry, and consolability, they have 0 to 2 points, and a total score can be from 0 to 10 points. Minimum pain is 0 points and a maximum pain is around 10 points. Whereas if the child is around more than 3 years of age, a Wong-Baker facial pain score can be utilized. But if the child is more than 8 years, yes, a VAS score can be utilized for these children. What about the neonates in NICU? How do we assess pain in these children? In neonates, for a pain assessment in neonates, a modified pain assessment tool or a modified PACT score can be utilized. Whereas if it is a ventilated neonate, you can utilize a comfort behavior score. So let me repeat it once again. For 2 months to 10 years, FLAC score. More than 3 years, Wong-Baker facial pain score. And for more than 8 years, VAS score. For neonates, a comfort behavior score or a modified PACT score can be utilized. Now, the surgeon may ask you, the examiner may ask you about the tight bag. Like when you were ventilating this child with bag and mask ventilation, you encountered a tight bag. So what are the complications? What are the things which will come into your mind? That what is the reason of the tight bag? It can be due to a high fresh gas flow. The oxygen flush may be stuck. The tube may be kinked. There may be some secretions which which may be blocking. Or if you have intubated, the tube may be too deep. There may be bronchospasm, or there may be some aspiration which has occurred. So all these things we have to keep in mind and treat these patients according to whatever you think is the complication arises. Before you have not intubated this child, there can also be laryngospasm. It can be a partial laryngospasm or it can be a complete laryngospasm. How to differentiate between a partial laryngospasm and a complete laryngospasm? In a partial laryngospasm and a complete laryngospasm, both will be having a rocking movement of the chest. But in a partial laryngospasm, the inspiratory stridor, you will be able to hear inspiratory stridor because of the small amount of opening which is present through the larynx. But in a complete laryngospasm, there will be no opening and there will be a silent chest. There will be no movements in the bag. And for these children, you need to give them some propofol. You can also administer succinyl and intubate these children. And slowly, as you deepen the anesthesia, the laryngospasm will wane off. And this is how you treat a laryngospasm. Now, these are the questions which the examiner may ask you. And if you have given a correct answers to these questions, you can score good marks. Just to show you certain pictures so that most of you might not have seen. And if you come across these type of photographs in your examination, you'll be able to better answer these questions. This child, as you can see, this is the vocal cord opening. A very small opening is present. Now, the problem with these children was that I missed the examination. During the examination, I missed to ask the history of whether the child was kept in NICU and whether the child was intubated. And this is what I got when I induced this patient, and I could not pass an endotracheal tube through this small hole. And later on, what we need to do is we need to do a laser surgery for this, and we had to do a split with a laser, and then only I was able to pass endotracheal tube through this. What happened in these children during the NICU stay, that because of the prolonged intubation, this child developed subglottic stenosis. So an assessment and a thorough preoperative assessment asking the history about ventilation just after the birth is very essential. This child, you can see low set ears. This child had a cardiac defect, a VSD which was present and which was detected after a strong suspicion that there is a cardiac defect. I could hear the murmur. That means the child, we did an echocardiography and a VSD was found and the child was postponed. Later on, after the repair of the VSD, the surgery was done for cleft lip. This child, looking from the front, looks normal, but the same child, if we look from the lateral side, we see that the mandible is hypognathic. It is a micrognathia which is present. So this child is a Perry-Robin sequence. So if you must examine this child in the lateral view also to assess whether the maxilla and the mandible are at the same level or the mandible is down. So this child is very difficult to intubate, and we must have all the gadgets with the help of video laryngoscope, bougie, stellate, and all the beautiful gadgets, even a fiber optic bronchoscope to intubate these children. This child, we can see that the sternum looks like it is excavated out. It is a depression in the sternum. So it is pectus excavatum. The child came to us with a repair of the cleft lip and a cleft palate. We did a first cleft lip surgery, and later on, after the repair of the cleft lip, you can see the child again came for cleft palate, and the child had the same cleft, the pectus excavatum, but the child had a good saturation and there was no tachypnea. So that's why we took up the child for surgery in both the settings. This child, you can see the chest has come up like a heap. So it is pectus carneatum. Another child with two dimples in the lower lip. This is von der Wode syndrome. The problem with these children is this: they ooze, they have some amount of saliva coming out from these pits, and you are not able to fix the tube in the midline, and it will be very difficult for you to fix the tube, and the tube may get dislodged. So what you need to do is you need to fix the tube somewhere here or at the angle for repair of cleft lip and cleft palate for such children. Everybody can recognize this. This is Down syndrome. This is another child with lateral nasal proboscis. One of the nostril has come up like an trunk of the elephant. So we did a surgery for these children, and this lateral nasal proboscis was sutured in the midline, and a nose was formed. Klippel-Feil syndrome with short web neck and fused cervical vertebra. The X-ray of such patient, you can see this cervical vertebra is fused completely, and positioning of the child for intubation becomes very difficult, and even the hyperextended position for the surgery is very difficult for these children. This is Treacher-Collins syndrome. You can see there is maxillary and mandibular hypoplasia, and these children, as the age advances, they become very difficult to intubate. Another child with hemifacial microsomia. Again, you can see that there is maxillary hypoplasia as compared to this side. The one side is hypoplastic. You can see the eye anomalies, ear anomalies also present in these children. This is holoprosencephaly, in which the development of the total face is very defective. Complete cleft lip and cleft palate. The cleft is even extending up to the nose and the eye even. So you must not be scary with these children. We must treat these children with very passionate amount. This is golden heart syndrome, in which you can see there is angular cleft along with the coloboma of the eye, and this patient also had cardiac defects. So this is a golden heart syndrome. Angular cleft. This is hypotelorism and microcephaly. That means the head size is very small and the distance between the intracanthus is very less. So hypotelorism along with microcephaly, these can be seen in various infective lesions also. Everybody can recognize this. This is hydrocephalus and hypertelorism along with cleft lip and cleft palate. These children are also difficult to intubate because of the improper positioning of the child. And along with this, the head becomes flexed, and again, the visualization of the larynx is very poor in these children. I do not know what is the name of this syndrome, but this looks like a figure of 8 or a dumbbell syndrome. There were no other cardiac defects in these children, and hence the child was successfully taken for cleft palate surgery. These children have to be posted according to the age. Younger the age, the surgery is done first, as compared to if the child is older, we do a surgery later, because they can tolerate a little bit of amount of fasting, but the younger children do not tolerate too much fasting, hence they have to be done earlier. Many a times you do not get any venous access for these children. The child is chubby and they may be having some edema due to nutritional deficiencies. So even a scalp vein can be utilized. This picture just depicts that how we have done a surgery, putting in a scalp vein or a 24 gauge Vigo on the scalp of the child. To emphasize upon the use of a precaudal stethoscope for these children, very essential to have a precaudal stethoscope to access the respiratory as well as the cardiac sounds in every patient. Just a picture to show how the blood loss estimation should be done, or online blood estimation with a mucus extractor which is attached to one end of the suction and the other end to the other suction, so that any amount of blood loss during the suctioning should come in this apparatus, and you will be able to measure what is the amount of blood loss. Inline fluid warming devices and blood warming devices are a must for these children, so that hypothermia can be prevented with the help of fluid warming devices and warming blankets. To emphasize upon the use of micro cuff tubes, these small cuffs are placed very distally, and hence, if the surgery is longer duration, the older tubes, the conventional tubes which you are using, this may lead to subglottic stenosis in the postoperative period, whereas the micro cuff tubes, the glottic aperture is avoided and the cuff is placed too distally. That is why in postoperative period, there is less stridor, less glottic edema in these children. So a use of microcuff tube is very essential. You can see with the use of microcuff tube, the subglottic area is free from the cuff, and hence avoids any trauma to the subglottic area, which is very essential and which is very sensitive for development of subglottic stenosis after the extubation. This is how the tube is fixed in the midline with dynaplast. Leucoplast, micropore will come out and will lead to extubation. Hence, use of dynaplast is very essential for these children. Proper eye padding is also essential. This picture shows how a pharyngeal pack, a thread is tied to the pharyngeal pack and it is protruded out and is fixed with a tape, so that as it has to be remembered, just before the extubation, this pharyngeal pack also must be removed. This is how the positioning of the child is done. Whole of the child is raised on a pillow, 8 to 10 centimeter or 4 to 5 inch pillow, and the head is hyperextended and allowed to rest on a head ring, so that they can be good exposure of the child, good exposure to the surgical field. And also, whatever amount of fluid and blood is coming, they can be collected in the nasopharynx, from where it can be easily suctioned out through the nasal cavity. This is how a retractor is placed, and the tube you can see is out of the surgical field. Even looking from above, you will not be able to see the endotracheal tube, and it looks like that the surgery is going on in a local anesthesia. But the anesthetists know that this surgery is going on in full general anesthesia with endotracheal intubation. This picture just shows that how the endotracheal tube doesn't come in the midline. Many a times after the full extraction of the Dingman retractor, the tube gets occluded because of the pressure of the retractor. Hence, what we can do is we can take out the tube from the retractor and it comes through the sidelines, and the tube is not obstructed and the airway pressure does not rise. If we are not able to do this, what we can do is we can place, you can see small needle caps, the disposable needle caps which are placed, so that to avoid any pressure on the tube, and this can easily surpass the pressure on the endotracheal tube and the airway pressures will not rise. This picture just shows that how the surgeon and the two anesthetists, they are occupying whole of the patient, whole of the small child, and very limited access for you. Hence, a good monitoring with all the airway parameters, inhaled and inhaled respiratory gases, heart rate, blood pressure, ECG, temperature, all the monitoring devices will actually help in assessing these children. To stress upon the use of Jankout section, because of the presence of clots, many times these clots may get obstructed, may lead to obstruction in the airways. Hence, use of Jankout section is very essential. One must always keep this Jankout section on your workstations, so that whenever needed can be utilized. The child which I have shown you previously about the Perel-Robin sequence, before the extubation, a nasopharyngeal tube or even a small endotracheal tube which has been cut so as to behave like a nasopharyngeal airway must be placed before extubation, so that because these children will have airway issues leading to tongue fall, and the child will lead into apnea, distress. Hence, before extubation, a nasal pharyngeal airway must be placed before extubation. This is the same child with a nasopharyngeal airway in place and the endotracheal tube has been extubated. Thank you very much to SS. Just to say that all these children are very, very, very precious, and we must take good care of them with a good preoperative assessment, having small knowledge, a small amount of knowledge about how the cleft lip and cleft palate surgeries do and about the post-operative period. So thank you very much for listening to me patiently. Thank you.